The discovery of essence. The loss of faith, as I have already observed, has no tendency to banish ideas. On the contrary, since doubt arises on reflection, it tends to keep the imagination on the stretch, and lends to the whole spectacle of things a certain immediacy, suavity, and humor. All that is sordid or tragic falls away, and everything acquires a lyric purity, as if the die had not yet been cast, and the ominous choice of creation had not been made. Often, the richest philosophies are the most skeptical. The mind is not then tethered in its home paddock, but ranges at will over the wilderness of being. The Indians, who deny the existence of the world, have a keen sense for its infinity and its variegated colors. They play with the monstrous and miraculous in the grand manner, as in the Arabian Nights. No critic has had a sharper eye for the outlines of ideas than Hume, who found it impossible seriously to believe that they reveal anything. In the critic, as in the painter, suspension of belief and of practical understanding is favorable to vision. The arrested eye renders every image limpid and unequivocal, and this is not merely a physiological compensation, in that, perhaps, the nervous energy withdrawn from preparation for action is allowed to intensify the process of mere sensation. There ensues a logical clarification as well, because, so long as belief, interpretation, and significance entered in, the object in hand was ambiguous, in seeking the fact the mind overlooked or confused the datum. Yet, each element in this eager investigation, including its very eagerness, is precisely what it is, and if I renounce for the moment all transitive intelligence, and give to each of these elements its due definition, I shall have a much richer, as well as clearer collection of terms and relations before me, than when I was clumsily attempting to make up my mind. Living beings dwell in their expectations rather than in their senses. If they are ever to see what they see, they must first, in a manner, stop living. They must suspend the will, as Schopenhauer put it. They must photograph the idea that is flying past, veiled in its very swiftness. This swiftness is not its own fault, but that of my haste and inattention. My hold is loose on it, as in a dream, or else perhaps those veils in that swiftness are the truth of the picture, and it is they that the true artist should be concerned to catch and to eternalize, restoring to all that the practical intellect calls vague in its own specious definition. Nothing is vague in itself, or rather than just what it is. Symbols are vague only in respect to their signification, when this remains ambiguous. It is accordingly an inapt criticism often passed upon Berkeley and Hume that they overlooked vagueness in ideas, although almost every human idea is scandalously vague. No, their intuition of ideas, at least initially, was quite direct and honest. The ambiguity they overlooked lay in the relation of ideas to physical things, which they wished to reduce to groups or a series of these pellucid ideas of chimerical physics. They had abstained altogether from identifying ideas with objects of natural knowledge, which are events and facts, and from trying to construct material things out of optical and tactile things. They might have much enriched the philosophy of specious reality, and discerned the innocent realm of ideas as directly as Plato did, but more accurately. In this, they need not have confused or undermined faith in natural things. Perception is faith. More perception may extend this faith, or reform it, but can never recant it, except by sophistry. These virgin philosophers were like the cubists or futurists in the painting of today. They might have brought to light curious and neglected forms of direct intuition. They could not justly have been charged with absurdity for seeing what they actually saw, but they lapsed into absurdity, and that irremediably, if they pretend to be the first and only masters of anatomy and topography. Far from being vague or abstract, the obvious ideas remaining to a complete skeptic may prove too absorbing, too multitudinous, or too sweet. A moral reprobation of them is no less intelligible than is the scientific criticism which rejects them as illusions and has no constituents of the existing world. Conscious no less than business may blame the skeptic, for a sort of luxurious idleness. He may call himself a lotus eater, may heave a sigh of fatigue at doing nothing, and may even feel a touch of the vertigo and wish to close his eyes on all these images that entertain him to no purpose. But skepticism is an exercise, not a life. It is a discipline fit to purify the mind of prejudice and render it all the more apt, when the time comes, to believe and to act wisely. In the meantime, he take no offense at the multiplicity of images that crowd upon him. If he is scrupulous, not to trust them, and to assert nothing at their prompting. Skepticism is the chastity of the intellect, and it is shameful to surrender it too soon or to the first comer. There is nobility in preserving it coolly and proudly through long youth, until at last, in the ripeness of instinct and discretion, it can be safely exchanged for fidelity and happiness. But the philosopher, when he is speculative only, is a sort of perpetual celibate. He is bent on not being betrayed, rather than on being annexed or inspired. And although, if he is at all wise, he must see that the true marriage of the mind is with nature and science and the practical arts, yet in his spectacle theoretic vocation, it will be a boon to him to view all experience simply in the precision and distinctness which all its parts acquire when not referred to any substance which they might present confusedly, nor to any hypothesis or action which they might suggest. The skeptic, then, as a consequence of carrying his skepticism to the greatest lengths, finds himself in the presence of more luminous and less equivocal objects than does the working and believing mind. Only these objects are without meaning. They are only what they are obviously, all surface. They show him everything thinkable with the greatest clearness and force, but he can no longer imagine that he sees in these objects anything save their instant presence and their face value. Skepticism, therefore, suspends all knowledge worthy of the name, all that transitive and presumptive knowledge of facts which is a form of belief, and instead it bestows intuition of ideas, contemplative, aesthetic, dialectical, arbitrary. But whereas transitive knowledge, though important if true, may always be challenged, intuition, on the contrary, which neither has nor professes to have any ulterior object or truth, runs no risks of error, because it claims no jurisdiction over anything alien or eventual. In this lucidity and calmness of intuition, there is something preternatural. Imagine a child accustomed to see clothes only on living persons, and hardly distinguishing them from the magical strong bodies that agitate them, and suddenly carry this child into a customer's shop, where he will see all sorts of garments hung in rows upon mannequins, with hollow breasts, all of visible wire, and little wooden knobs instead of heads. He might be seriously shocked, or even frightened. How should it be possible for clothes standing up like this not to be people? Such abstractions, he might say to himself, are metaphysically impossible. Either these figures must be secretly alive and ready, when he least expects it, to begin to dance, or else they are not real at all, and he can only fancy that he sees them. Just as the spectacle of all these gaunt clothes without bodies might make the child cry, so later might the whole spectacle of nature, if ever he became a skeptic. The little word is has its tragedies. It marries and identifies different things with the greatest innocence, and yet no two are ever identical. And if therein lies the charm of wedding them and calling them one, therein too lies the danger. Whenever I use the word is, except in sheer tautology, I deeply misuse it, and when I discover my error, the world seems to fall asunder, and the members of my family no longer know one another. Existence is a strong body and familiar motion, which the young mind expects to find in every dummy. The oldest of us are sometimes no less recalcitrant to the spectacle of the garments of existence, which is all we ever saw of it, when the existence is taken away. Yet it is these actual and familiar, but now disemboweled objects that skepticism introduces us, as if to a strange world, a vast customer's gallery of ideas, where all sorts of patterns and models are on exhibition. without bodies to wear them, and where no human habits of motion distract the eye from the curious cut and precise embroideries of every article. This display, so complete in spectacular reality, not a button, nor a feather wanting, or unobserved, is not the living crowd that it ought to be, but a mockery of it, like the palace of the sleeping beauty. To my conventional mind, clothes without bodies are no less improper than bodies without clothes, yet the conjunction of these things is but human. All nature runs about naked, and quite happy, and I am not so remote from nature as not to revert, on occasion, to that nakedness, which is unconsciousness, with profound relief. But ideas without things, and apparel without wearers, seems to me a stranger condition. I think the garments were made to fit the limbs, and should collapse without them. Yet, like the fig leaves of Eden, they are not garments essentially, they become such by accident, when one or another of them is appropriated by the providential buyer, not necessarily human, whose instinct may choose it, or else it is perfectly content to miss its chance, and to lie stacked forever among its motley neighbors in this great store of neglected finery. It was the fear of illusion that originally disquieted the honest mind, congenitally dogmatic, and drove it in the direction of skepticism, and may find three ways, not equally satisfying to its honesty, in which that fear of illusion may be dispelled. One is death, in which illusion vanishes and is forgotten. But although anxiety about error, and even positive error, are thus destroyed, no solution is offered to the previous doubt, no explanation of what could have called forth that illusion, or what could have dissipated it. Another way out is by correcting the error and substituting a new belief for it. But while in animal life this is the satisfying solution, and the old habit of dogmatism may be resumed in consequence without practical inconvenience, speculatively the case is not at all advanced, because no criterion of truth is afforded except custom, comfort, and the accidental absence of doubt. And what is absent by chance may return at any time unbidden. The third way, at which I have now arrived, is to entertain the illusion without succumbing to it, accepting it openly as an illusion, and forbidding it to claim any sort of being but that which it obviously has, and then, whether it profits me or not, it will not deceive me. What will remain of this non-descriptive illusion will then be a truth, and a truth, the being of which requires no explanation, since it is utterly impossible that it should have been otherwise. Of course, I may still ask why the identity of this particular thing with itself should have occurred to me, a question which could only be answered by plunging into a realm of existence and natural history, every part and principle of which would be just as contingent, just as uncalled for, and just as inexplicable as this accident of my being. But that this particular thing, or any other which might have occurred to me instead, should be constituted as it is, raises no problem, for how could it have been constituted otherwise? Nor is there any moral offense any longer in the contingency of my view of it, since my view of it involves no error. The error came from a wild belief about it, and the possibility of error came from a wild propensity to belief. Relieve now the pressure of that animal haste and that hungry presumption. The error is washed out of the illusion. It is no illusion now, but an idea. Just as food would cease to be food, and poison poison, if you remove the stomach and the blood that they might nourish or infect. And just as beautiful things would cease to be beautiful if you remove the wonder and the welcome of living souls, so if you eliminate your anxiety, deceit itself becomes entertainment, and every illusion but so much added acquaintance with the realm of form. For the unintelligible accident of existence will cease to appear to lurk in this manifest being, weighing and crowding it, and threatening it with being swallowed up by nondescript neighbors. It will appear dwelling in its own world, and shining by its own light, however brief may be the glimpse of it. For no date will be written on it. No frame of full or of empty time will shut it in. Nothing in it will be addressed to me, nor suggested of any spectator. It will seem an event in no world, an accident in no experience. The quality of it will have ceased to exist, it will be merely the quality which it inherently, logically, and inalienably is. It will be an essence. Retrenchment has its rewards. When by difficult suspension of judgment I have deprived a given image of all adventitious significance, when it is taken neither for the manifestation of a substance, nor for an idea in a mind, nor for an event in a world, but simply if a color for that color, and if music for that music, and if a face for that face, then an immense cognitive certitude comes to compensate me for so much cognitive absentation. My skepticism, at last, has touched bottom, and my doubt has found honorable rest in the absolutely indubitable. Whatever essence I find and note, that essence, and no other, is established before me. I cannot be mistaken about it, since I now have no object of intent other than the object of intuition. If for some private reason I am dissatisfied and wish to change my entertainment, nothing prevents, but the change leaves the thing I saw possessed of all its quality, for the sake of which I perhaps disliked or disowned it. That while one essence is before me, someone else may be talking of another, which he calls by the same name, is nothing to the purpose. And if I find myself change and correct myself, choosing a new essence in place of the old, my life indeed may have shifted its visions and its interests, but the characters they had when I harbored them are theirs without change. Indeed, only because each essence is the essence defined by instant apprehension can I be truly said to have changed my mind, for I can have discarded any one of them only by substituting something different. This new essence could not be different from the former one if each was not unchangeably itself. There is, then, a sort of play with the non existent, or game of thought, which intervenes in all alleged knowledge of matters of fact, and survives that knowledge, if this is ever questioned, or is proved. To this mirage of the non existent, or intuition of essence, the pure skeptic is confined, and confined is hardly the word, because though without faith and risk he can never leave that thin and bodiless plane of being, this plane, in its tenuity, is infinite, and there is nothing possible elsewhere that, as a shadow and a pattern, is not prefigured there. To consider essence is, from a spiritual point of view, to enlarge acquaintance with true being, but it is not even to broach knowledge of fact. And the ideal object, so defined, may have no natural significance, though it has aesthetic immediacy and logical definition. The modest scope of the speculative acquaintance with essence renders it infallible, whilst the logical and aesthetic ideality of its object renders that object eternal. Thus, the most radical skeptic may be consoled without being rebuked or refuted. He may leap at one bound over the whole human tangle of beliefs and dogmatic claims, elude human incapacity and bias, and take hold of the quite sufficient assurance that any essence or ideal quality of being which he may be intuiting has just the characters he is finding in it, and has them eternally. This is no idle assurance. After all, the only thing that can ultimately interest me in other men's experience, or, apart from animal egotism, in my own, is just this character of the essences which at any time have swum into our ken, not at all the length of time through which we may have beheld them, nor the circumstances that produced that vision, unless these circumstances in turn, when considered, place before the mind the essences which it delights to entertain. Of course, the choice and the interest of essences comes entirely from the bent of the animal, which elicits the vision of them from his own soul and its adventures, and nothing but affinity with my animal life lends the essences I am able to discern their moral color, so that to my mind they are beautiful, horrible, trivial, or vulgar. The good essences are such as accompany and express a good life, and in them, whether good or bad, that life has its eternity. Certainly, when I cease to exist and to think, I shall lose hold on this assurance. But the theme in which, for a moment, I found the fulfillment of my expressive impulses will remain, as it always was, a theme fit for consideration. even if no one else should consider it, and I should never consider it again. Nor is this all. Not only is the character of each essence inalienable, and, so long as it is open to intuition, indubitable, but the realm of essence is infinite, since any essence I happen to have hit upon is independent of me, and would possess its precise character if I had never been born, or had never been led by the circumstances of my life and temperament to apprehend that particular essence. Evidently, all other essences, which I have not been led to think of, rejoice in the same sort of impalpable being. Impalpable, yet the only sort of being that the most rugged experience can ever actually find. Thus a mind enlightened by skepticism and cured of noisy dogma, a mind discounting all reports and free from all tormenting anxiety about its own fortunes or existence, finds in the wilderness of essence a very sweet and marvelous solitude. The ultimate reaches of doubt and renunciation open out for it by an easy transition into fields of endless variety and peace, as if through the gorges of death it had passed into a paradise where all things are crystallized into the image of themselves and have lost their urgency and their venom.